All right, let's talk about Jared Goff a little bit because he's played the San Francisco 49ers quite a bit, being in this division at one time. And a couple years ago, as a Lion, he played the San Francisco 49ers week one, if you remember that game.
Yeah.
I remember that one all too well. But Jared Goff started out his career 3-0 against the San Francisco 49ers. Since then, he's gone 0-5. That's the thumbnail. It said Owen, and it pointed to him because he's 0-5 against the 49ers since then. Do you believe that that stat matters in this game?
No, I don't. I don't. Those type of trends don't really mean much to me because this is a new game, right? It like whatever happened in the past with Jared Goff really is meaningless at this point because this is a new team. I think they've only played Dan Campbell once, right? And if I'm not mistaken, they were up by quite a bit and they almost came back and won in that game, or they made a push at least, right? Kyle took the starters out and they started like totally like getting in the groove and coming back on the 49ers. But to me, it doesn't really matter. This is a different team than any team the 49ers have faced before against this Detroit team, right? This team is hot, man. They got a lot of new weapons. They got a bulked up offensive line. They got some really good young talent. They have a top running back in the NFL in Jair Gibbs. Gibbs, I believe, is fifth in yards per carry in the NFL, and CMC is second. So CMC is 5.4 yards per carry. Gibbs is 5.2, which is good for the fifth best running back in the NFL. So two really good running backs going at it this week. This Lion team's different. I don't care what's happened in the past. Those trends to me are meant to be broken so that they can't have any sense of false confidence like we got this guy's number. And it's really not just a golf record, right? That's what I like. Sometimes I like to bring this up because I think a lot of people they always make it about the quarterback. That's also a Lions versus 49ers record that you're talking about, right? It's not just golf.
Well, really, a Rams versus 49ers record.
Rams.
Because most of those games were the Rams, yeah.
Right. So it could be the Rams, the Lions, right? This is a different team. That doesn't really mean much to me personally.
Yeah. I actually think it does hold some weight in the sense that they know exactly how to play Jared Goff, right? Like they know the game plan. They know what they have to do. Now, it doesn't mean they're going to win. It doesn't hold water in the sense that they're for sure going to win because the last 5 times they've beat them. That's not what I'm saying. But I think it does matter in the sense that they know exactly what it takes to beat Jared Goff. They know how to get him uncomfortable. They know how to get him to panic play a little bit. And so they should have a good game plan for him. Now, you've got to execute on said game plan, and that's where it comes down to the players. They've got a good offensive line. 49ers have got to be able to overcome that. They've got a very good running game as well, something that Jared Goff for a big chunk of these games has not had in these matchups. So, yes, I think that it matters to the extent that they know how to beat Jared Goff. Now, when it comes to actually getting it done, that's a different story. I don't think it matters there. And I think that's what you're saying. So I think we agree, but there is some game plan things. They know what they're getting in Jared Goff, whether it was Jared Goff on the Rams, Jared Goff on the Lions. They know exactly what they're getting. Let's talk about Jared Goff just for a second, though, outside of this record. Do you feel like Jared Goff's a little bit underrated by fans across the league?
Oh, definitely, I do. Yeah, I think if you look at his numbers, they're very similar to Brock Purdy's. He's not as mobile. He's definitely a statue in the pocket. And, like to your point, like I think everyone knows what you want to do against Jared Goff, but only 5 teams have been able to do that this season, right? So 49ers got to get out and execute. I think Jared Goff is extremely underrated. If you look at the top 5 quarterbacks in production over the last 2 seasons, there's only one guy that's been consistent over the last 2 seasons in production, and that's Jared Goff. I think he's extremely underrated. I think he's done a fantastic job in this offense for the Lions, and I don't think he's to be taken lightly. I mean, people say, oh, he panics under pressure and he's a statue, and all that, it may be true, but he's 12-5 this season as a team, and he's been consistent over the last 2 seasons. So, the 49ers got to get out and execute. I don't think it's a mystery what you got to do to Goff. But can you get it done? He's actually really good at getting the ball out really quickly. And this Lions offense has done a fantastic job of scheming those situations up for him. So I mean, his stats are almost identical to Brock Purdy's outside of yards per attempt. So, it's like 2 yards difference, but that has more of a scheme offensive connotation than anything else. So, if you think Brock Purdy is a really good quarterback, then I don't see how anyone can't think Jared Goff is a good quarterback. It doesn't make sense to me from a statistical standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, I get, I think he's underrated, but I don't think he's great by any means. I think he's at his best. He's borderline top 10. And we've seen him do some amazing things. I mean, the shootout with Mahomes was fantastic. And I will say, I saw him play in college, a night game at Autzen Stadium, Oregon Ducks, Cal Bears, rain, cold, and he was not affected. He was throwing seeds all over the field. Very, very good. I was very impressed with him in person. I think that was his final year in college, if I remember correctly. So, I mean, he's got talent. He's got arm. There's not a throw that he can't make. There really is not a throw that he can't make. He's got a ton of arm talent. And if you give him time, he will get the best of it. It's funny because I call Eli Manning clutch Jared Goff. I think like stature wise and what they bring to the game is actually very similar. I think Jared Goff protects the ball a little bit more, but as far as the way that they're built, how they can make every throw, how at times they can be underrated as players, but they'll also just make that gut curling mistake at the wrong time. There's a lot of similarities between the two. I think Goff is a good quarterback, but I think that I think if anybody sits down and actually looks at Jared Goff and compares him to the rest of the league, they'd probably have him in that 12 to 14 range consistently. And I think that's where he belongs. I think that's totally fair. He does have some very good processing and he has a great arm, but I can't get over the panic sacks, man. I can't unsee it. I can't unsee it. So for me, I think that's about where he's at.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at the quarterbacks a lot yesterday. I'm going to talk about it more. I got a show with Croc at 10:15, and I was going to talk about it more with him. But I was, I look at the quarterbacks throughout the NFL, and I have Brock Purdy at probably like ninth. I said eighth, but I think it's ninth without debate of guys I would take over him. But then it becomes debatable, and I think there's guys like, and I know this is a 9 show, and people are gonna, come at me, but it is what it is. I think guys like Jared Goff are in that conversation. Guys like Jordan Love are in that conversation. But I have 8 to 9 quarterbacks better than Brock Purdy. So I don't think Brock Purdy at 9 or wherever you have him versus Jared Goff at 12 or wherever you have him is much of a difference outside of the mobility.
It's so hard. To me, it's just so hard to weigh 5, 6, 7, 8 seasons versus a season, right? It's hard. Like, how do you weigh it? I mean, if you're talking now, in this moment, I take Brock Purdy over Goff, and I wouldn't even think twice about it. But in 4 years, if Purdy's career doesn't go at this trajectory and Goff's still doing it, I mean, at his peak, he was better, but was he better? No, he wasn't better. He was at his peak. He had a better peak, but overall, he wasn't a better player. So that's why these things take time to curate for me. And that's why when you look at quarterback rankings, there are 7 or 8 guys, usually around 7 guys that are consistently there in the top 10. Those are your guys. And then you got 3 or 4 that are always floating in and out of the top 10. You got your Jared Goffs, you got your Dax, you got your Kyler Murray, you got your Tannehill's done it for a year. You've got Kirk Cousins, Baker Mayfield can get in there for a season. Like the back half of the top 10 is constantly fluctuating. If you want to be a bona fide top 10 quarterback, you got to be in that top 7 range. And once you're there consistently, and that's what you see. But the back end of the top 10 is constantly fluctuating, constantly. So it's like season to season, game to game, week to week. These things happen. So it's so tough, man. It's so tough to have these conversations. But I personally think that if most people sat down and made a list, Jared Goff would be in that 12 to 14 range. And I think that that's fair. But is he underrated in the sense of just barbershop talk? I think most people that don't watch Jared Goff, especially 49er fans, I feel like have a warped view of quarterbacks because when they watch quarterbacks play, it's always against their defense. And the 49ers are always elite on defense. So they're seeing these quarterbacks at their potential worst, and they're like, that guy sucks. This guy's terrible. And it's like, well, of course, like against this defense, it was a bad game, but did you watch him the other 16 games? Because that's not who he is. It was a bad game against this defense, which this defense tends to do to a lot of quarterbacks. So you can't just look at that game and be, whatever. So I feel like there's a little bit of a warped view when it comes to quarterbacks and how they really rate. But Jared Goff, I think, is in barbershop talk underrated because most people would just say he's trash. And he's not. He's definitely not trash.
I think a lot of that comes from the rivalry that he was on the Rams. So a lot of that comes from that, right? A lot of Niner fans just refuse to give credit to players from our rivalry. So I think that plays in a part too.